The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
And right off the bat, let's say a hearty mazel tov to the ownership group of the Baltimore Orioles, headed up by David Rubenstein. And his group includes Mike Arrighetti, who pulled a page right out of the Josh Harris playbook by going into Pickles Pub before yesterday's Orioles opener against the Angels and saying, quote, "We're buying everybody a beer. Let's go O's." He had a can of Miller Lite and a can of Coors Light in each hand, I guess indicating his beer preference or not wanting to play favorites or whatever. But this is the way to say to the fan base, hey, we're not the old guys, right? Exactly what Josh Harris did as soon as he became owner of the Commanders. A local radio station was doing a rally at a bar near Nats Park, and he called into the radio station and said, let's spread the word throughout the bar. I'm buying everybody around. So that made people feel good right off the bat. And, wow, what a way to start with the Orioles blowing out the Angels 11-3. They got a great pitching performance from their new ace, the guy they got from the Milwaukee Brewers. He had 11 strikeouts yesterday. And, all looks good as they come off this 100-win season. And, they are very much hoping that Corbin Burns can be the ace of a pitching staff, which is good enough to get them back to the playoffs this year. Doesn't have to be a division-winning year. It's a crapshoot once you get to the playoffs, as we know as Nats fans, when they made it as a wild card team in 5 years ago. Wow, already 5 years ago. And they managed to get it done. So, yeah, it's a great start for the Orioles. Terrible start for the Nationals right off the bat, even before the game started. They lost their first baseman, Nick Senzel, maybe for a couple of months with a broken thumb in pregame warmups. Just makes you think about Cal Ripken and how he was able to play all those consecutive games. And here's opening day and a position that Cal played about a third of his career. I guess 2/3 of it was at shortstop, and at the beginning, at the end, he was a third baseman. And never missed a game. And here's old Nick Senzel getting ready to start his first game as a National. Broken thumb, going to be on the shelf for a while. And then Josiah Gray got lit up, and they lost 8-2 as they will play game 2 of that series tomorrow. And the Orioles continue their series with the Angels tomorrow. That's a 4 o'clock start. And if you're asking the question, well, if opening day was yesterday, why do they need a rest right away? Why aren't they playing today? The reason for it is if there was a rain out, they would want to have another day. So that's what they have, another weekday gap there. Usually starts on a Thursday. I guess it started on a Monday before, but usually on a Thursday, so that you reserve that second day just in case you have a rain out, which they didn't have, so they get an extra day of rest and really get going, and high hopes for the Orioles this year. Rubenstein, by the way, had a news conference before the game, and he said, I thank John Angelos and his family for all they have done to bring us to this point. John led a dramatic overhaul of the team's management, roster, recruitment strategy, and farm system in recent years. Our job is to build on these accomplishments to try and advance a world-class professional sports agenda with eyes on returning a World Series trophy to Baltimore. And he, made the rounds. He was schmoozing with the fans. He was talking to the concession workers. That's the way you do it. And if you look at this takeover by Rubenstein versus what Josh Harris got, it's a totally different story. Maryland has committed to, what is it? I forget what the number is, but it's like maybe $30 million to fix up what is already a great stadium in Camden Yards. And as Rubenstein mentions, he's got a great system in place. He's got Mike Elias. You don't let that guy go. He's done a phenomenal job as the general manager, Major League Executive of the Year last year, and Brandon Hyde, American League Manager of the Year. This is a much different situation. So, what he was able to do and taking over a team that was already good with already a good structure in place, really all he has to do is restore goodwill with the fan base, and winning games takes care of a lot of that. 101 wins last year. So David Rubenstein doing a great job in taking over and doing all the right things, hitting all the right notes as the Orioles opened up yesterday. And we will be your home for Orioles baseball once again throughout the season. And every Wednesday we do Orioles preview. We had Mike Elias on this past Wednesday. So if you'd like to find that, go to ESPN630DC.com and you can find it there. March finally got mad, right? We had an opening weekend of the NCAA tournament that was kind of, we had one double-digit seed, North Carolina State, moving on, and pretty much chalk. All 4 number ones moved on. All 4 number twos moved on. And last night, we finally had what makes this tournament what it is. And the dark jerseys are worn by the lower seeds, and the 3 of the 4 teams wearing dark jerseys last night won. Now, UConn is the number one seed in the tournament. Doesn't look like anybody's going to beat them. They took care of San Diego State, the same team they played last year in the NCAA final. They beat them by 30 points, and they did it all in the second half because San Diego State was hanging in there for most of the first half, 4, 5, and then as the second half opened up, they just blew their doors off. So they now get Illinois. And Illinois was a winner last night over Iowa State, 72-69. And one of the most interesting stories of this tournament, and it's underplayed because it's television, and they're not gonna tell you much about this. But last night, Terrence Shannon Jr. had 29 points in 22 minutes, and he has been outstanding for Illinois throughout the tournament. He's averaging 23.3 points a game throughout the season. First team all Big Ten during the Big Ten tournament, scored 102 points in 3 games, which is 1 point short of the tournament record. But he's got something hanging over his head, which could send him to jail for a long, long time. And you're not going to hear about this on the broadcast, but I'm going to tell you here what's going on. In December, he was charged with rape for an alleged incident that took place 3 months earlier. He was suspended, then put back on the team after a month. He's not talking to reporters about it, but maintaining his innocence. He was charged in December with 1 count of rape or an alternative count of sexual battery after a woman allegedly said that he called her over, grabbed her from behind, and reached under her skirt and inappropriately touched her. The incident took place at a bar in Lawrence, Kansas, where Shannon was visiting a football game. Illinois was playing there in early September against Kansas, and a warrant was issued for his arrest. And he turned himself in and was arrested in Lawrence on December 28th on a charge of rape, sexual intercourse without consent, and use of force. He posted a $50,000 bond. And he attempted to, because he was suspended immediately once he turned himself in, and he attempted to get the suspension overturned. January 2nd, he wrote a 1,400-word letter to the university's student-athlete conduct panel. In it, he maintained his innocence, offered a plea for his suspension to be overturned. On January 8th, his attorneys filed for a temporary restraining order against Illinois seeking immediate reinstatement. 11 days later, a U.S. judge found that Illinois had violated his civil rights and reinstated him. He came back, scored 16 points in a win over Rutgers. It was his first game in 30 days, and he was actually due in court in February, but there was a scheduling conflict, not for him, but for the court, and so they moved it to May 10th, when we will be a month removed from the end of the NCAA tournament. But he is right now the best player in the tournament. I don't know if Illinois can get by UConn, but this is a story that the NCAA and television is not going to want to talk about when we head to the Final Four next weekend. But they were good enough last night to beat Iowa State 72-69. That's the mildest of the upsets. The other two, somewhat stunning. Clemson, which is a 6 seed, knocked down Arizona. And Arizona, I watched most of this game because the Connecticut game became a blowout. Arizona, their shooting from 3 made Maryland look like sharpshooters. They were 5 of 28 from 3. Missed 23 three-pointers. Caleb Love, who helped to take North Carolina to the final last year and now is transferred to Arizona, 0 for 9. 0 for 9. He only made 5 shots on the night, 5 for 18. And Arizona goes down to Clemson, a 6 seed, 77-72. And then I didn't stay up to watch it because it's such a late tip time, but North Carolina, the first of the number ones to fall, and they fall to Alabama by a score of 89-87. And they get this done because they were able to shoot. Alabama shot 48% from the field. They were 11 of 26 from 3, 42% from 3. North Carolina got a couple of really good performances, but R.J. Davis, who's a fourth-year senior, you don't see guys stay 4 years in one place anymore, but Davis 0 for 9 from 3. So his backcourt mate from last year, Caleb Love, goes 0 for 9 in Arizona's loss, and R.J. Davis goes 0 for 9 as North Carolina shot 12 of 32 from 3. Armando Bacot, 5-year player, goes out with his head up. He had 19 points and 12 rebounds. And I don't know if we'll ever have a player like this again. Will we have a guy who gets 5 full seasons and stays in the same place? He got the extra season, of course, because of COVID. But now turns his attention to the NBA. I don't know how good of an NBA player he's going to be, but he leaves North Carolina with some incredible numbers thanks to being a starter for 5 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely hurt, and I think we all are a little shocked. We don't underestimate any opponent, and I think today, it was tough, but all year we play hard, and today we play hard, and they just made more shots than us, and it's tough. Losing is not the result we want, especially with just how talented we are as a team, and we felt like we had a chance to win the national championship this year, but, I wouldn't change anything that happened all year. It was a special year just with teammates, coaches. It was just, for me personally, a restored sense of funness. Just my love for the game just grows so much. My faith this year has grown a lot, and I'm going to miss everything about just being with this team, the coaches. I've been knowing Coach Davis since I was 15 years old, and knowing this is the last time I'll play for him, it definitely hurts.
And we should joke about this, that a player would leave college and have to take a pay cut in the pros. He might. I don't even know if he's going to be a draft pick. And he's also going to lose some endorsements. He's been doing these tax return endorsements and other things during his career at North Carolina, and that ends. This is the coach, Hubert Davis, who got his team to the final last year, comes up short in the Sweet 16 this year. And I want you to listen to this because I sense while he's talking, he gets it in his head, now wait a minute, I don't want to be dumping on players who come in as transfers. So he starts out where he wants to really praise Armando Bacot and R.J. Davis. Bacot 5 years, Davis 4. And then I think realizes halfway through, well, wait a minute, I don't want to be the guy that says we're only building our program with guys who stay. We still need these transfers to come in and out. So this was Hubert Davis after the loss last night.
In a time in college basketball where there's so many moving parts and so many changes, you had 2 players that you couldn't ask for them to be as successful as they have been for 4 and 5 years respectfully at the same institution. Their commitment to Carolina, their commitment to this program and the community, those are the things that my hope is talked about more, about guys staying committed to the process. And not just RJ and Armando, but also Cormac. You got, Cormac and Harrison and Jay Witt and Pax and James, and you've got guys that come in here as transfers and they dove right into what this place is all about. So much so that you don't even think that they've been here for 1 year. You feel like they've been here for 4 years. So the commitment of this team from the start to have wanted to be a team is the thing that has blown me away and has restored my faith that you can't have a bunch of guys in a locker room that genuinely enjoy being around each other and celebrate the success of others and really want to be a team.
Did you sense that? He's giving all kinds of praise to the guys who stayed. And then, oh, wait a minute. What about the guys who came in? Yeah, they integrated themselves right away. It was like they weren't here for 1 year. They were here longer than that. To be a college basketball coach these days and what you have to deal with. So the highly anticipated matchup that we hope would happen with Arizona playing North Carolina, that's not going to happen. It's going to be Clemson and Alabama in the late game tomorrow. It's supposed to tip off close to 9 o'clock, and then the 6 o'clock start has Illinois against Connecticut, and right now Connecticut looks unbeatable. Tonight, interesting thing sets up because you have Houston playing Duke, and you have NC State playing Marquette with the winners set to beat. Marquette is a 2 seed. They would certainly be the favorite against 11 seed North Carolina State. But, you know, what happened 41 years ago, who knows? You know, they might be their year. They won the ACC tournament. That's the only way they got in. They beat Texas Tech, upset them in the first round. And then Oakland, which had pulled off the upset of Kentucky, they handled them in the second round. And now they are playing Marquette, which is a 2 seed. Shaka Smart is the Marquette coach. He's got an excellent team this year. They won their opener, which was not exactly a cupcake, as they beat Western Kentucky 89-69, and then they beat Colorado, which had pulled off the upset of Florida. So now they get the Cinderella NC State. And Shaka Smart on our morning show yesterday or the other day asked what he fears most about playing the Wolfpack.
Well, I think it starts with Burns. He's a piece of work. I mean, he is phenomenal down there. Just the way he can pass, the way he can spin off defenders. Obviously, his feel for the game, his touch around the basket. He is a very unique player. So we're going to have to do a good job trying to, give him different looks. I don't think you can guard him the same way every time. And then their guys are playing with incredible confidence. They've won 7 games in a row, including 5 in 5 days in the ACC tournament, and obviously the last 2 in the NCAA tournament.
Coach, you have been in a position before where you've made a deep tournament run, getting to the Final Four. What's different in your coaching approach from the regular season to the tournament? What do you have to change in order to have success in this format?
Well, I think most of the things stay the same because the same things go into winning. But I do think that it feels different, and the nerves and the excitement is different. So the way you support the guys, the way that you help them through just the environment is different. And I think it comes down to, again, leaning on your habits, leaning on your relationships with one another. And I would say when you get to March, being even more of a cheerleader as a coach than we were in the previous months.
That's really interesting, Coach. I'm talking with Shaka Smart, Marquette men's basketball coach. You guys were picked 9th in the Big East. That was a motivator for you going into the season. But what do you mean now as a cheerleader versus just a head coach?
Well, we were actually picked 9th last year, and then we won the Big East. This year, we returned almost everybody, and we were picked first.
Oh, my
bad.
And
we did not win. And so I think the difference for us this year is we had much higher expectations on us, but we went through a lot of adversity. We had one of our really good players tear his ACL. Tyler Kolek missed a lot of time with an oblique injury. But what I meant by being a cheerleader is these guys know what we have to do. It's late in the season. We've played nearly 40 games. Now it comes down to helping them, supporting them to do it, and to get to a place of full acceptance of everything around the game. Because when you are a gladiator out there on the court, there's a lot coming at you.
Coach, there are 3 Big East teams by my count that have gotten to the Sweet 16. What does it say about the strength of your league to have that representation from your conference?
Well, unfortunately, we didn't get some of the other teams in our league into the NCAA tournament that we felt were deserving. It was just kind of a strange dynamic with all the bid stealers. But certainly UConn is as good as anyone in the country, if not better. Creighton's playing at a high level, and our guys have done a great job getting us to this spot.
Coach, after your team punched their ticket to the Sweet 16, you were a bit emotional after that victory over Colorado. If you don't mind, take us into that moment. Why did you feel emotional after that victory?
Well, have you ever gone to the Sweet 16? It's emotional. I mean, it's, I'm a human being. Our players are human beings. We've been through a lot of twists and turns over the course of our season and even previous seasons. And So to go do something special with a group of guys that you love and that love each other, that is very emotional. And it'll continue to be emotional because this is a season that we don't want to end.
We're talking with Shaka Smart, head coach of Marquette. They have NC State on Friday. They're the 2 seed. Tyler Kolek, your point guard, you mentioned him. People have compared him to Steve Nash. That's not fair to anyone, honestly, in college. But how good is he, and how impressed were you with the rest of the team that you were able to win without him in the Big East tournament a little bit?
Well, make no mistake about it, we're way better with him. Our guys did a good job for 6 games trying to fill in and step forward when he was out. But him coming back in the first round of the NCAA tournament gave us a real shot in the arm. He's the best passer I've ever coached. He's as competitively mature as anyone I've ever been around in college basketball. And he just is a winner. He wants to win. He finds ways to make his teammates better. And we're really, really grateful that he's on our team.
Coach, in this era of NIL, I'm curious to know how that impacts your recruiting and the challenges that you have not being at a program like Texas anymore, or being at a program that doesn't necessarily have the coffers, doesn't necessarily have the same level of financial backing. What are the challenges in being able to recruit and retain your players in this era of NIL?
Well, if somebody wants to come to college and their number one reason that they're going to choose a school is NIL, then they should not come here. Our guys actually get really, really good NIL support, but we've never once used it in recruiting as an incentive. Technically, you're not supposed to do that. Obviously, everybody does. But we want people to come here because they want to win, because they want to be a part of something special, because they value relationships, growth, and victory, which is the same 3 things that we value. Obviously, there's some pragmatics behind. I know what it's like being a college kid with the same $2 in my pocket for a month straight. So these guys absolutely deserve to benefit from NIL, and our guys do. We have very, very good NIL support for our current players, and I do think that they value that and they appreciate that. But that's not why they choose to be here. They choose to be here because of the experience they have as part of our program.
Coach, one of the things, just to follow up on that, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe you have any transfers on the team or limited amounts of transfers on the team. Is that correct?
We have 1 transfer. We took Tyler Kolek. When actually my very first day getting the job, I called Tyler Kolek. He was transferring from George Mason because his coach had been let go. Otherwise, he never would have left. Other than that, everyone on our team started their career at Marquette. I believe we're one of only 2 programs at the high major level, along with Michigan State, that's not taken a Division I transfer in the last 2 years. Nothing against transfers, but I love getting to know guys and their families during their junior year of high school, building a relationship with them, and really coming together around a partnership to help them grow as a person first and then as a player. And then you know who you're dealing with. You know who's on your team as opposed to out there coaching strangers.
And is that realistic to keep up in the modern day world of college basketball of like, hey, we're going to have these kids, we're going to develop these kids, they're going to be great by the end and go to the pros, as you've had players do that. Is that realistic to keep up?
Man, that is the fascinating question. It's going to be interesting to see because obviously it's not the norm. And there are a lot of very, very good players in the transfer portal. So it would kind of be like an NBA team saying, hey, we're not going to take any free agents. I don't think anyone would be silly enough to take away from that. But at the same time, I don't really like prioritizing someone coming in from the outside over guys that have worn our jersey and have won and have shed their blood, sweat, and tears in our practice gym. Something doesn't sit right about that with me. That doesn't mean we would never take a transfer, but we're absolutely going to prioritize the guys that are already in our program.
That's Shaka Smart. He took VCU to the Final Four. I think it was 11 years ago. And he's going to try and get there with 2-seed Marquette, but they have to get by number 11 seed North Carolina State tonight. And if NC State pulls off another upset, they very likely could be playing Houston, which plays Duke tonight, and that would be a rematch of the 1983 final with almost the same scenario. Houston is not Phi Slamma Jamma Houston, but they're damn good, and they managed to survive Texas A&M. And, boy, wouldn't that be something on Sunday if we got a Houston-NC State matchup to get to the Final Four. And it's entirely possible, but Shaka Smart would like his team to roll on tonight, and we'll see what happens. They are the first game. Yeah, so that's a watchable game for Andy. Starts at 7 o'clock, Purdue and Gonzaga, 7:30. Then Houston and Duke at 9:30, and Tennessee and Creighton, 10 o'clock tonight. And they're playing in Boston. Coming up, we will get to what Rob Manfred said about Shohei Ohtani as the investigation of baseball continues into what looks like a very, very messy story. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
40 years ago today, the Baltimore Colts snuck out of town in Mayflower moving vans in the middle of the night. It was an absolutely disgraceful act by Bob Irsay, and it took 12 years for Baltimore to get a team back. We'll look back at that awful night for Baltimore 40 years ago. Meantime, the commissioner of baseball, Rob Manfred, he's maybe sitting on a powder keg here with this Shohei Ohtani story. He was on High Heat with Chris Russo yesterday on the MLB Network, and he said, given the way the story has unfolded, it is important in assuring our fans about the integrity of the game that we verify the things that Mr. Ohtani said. It's really that simple. Is he telling the truth or is he lying? Was he the victim of theft by his longtime interpreter, Ippei Muzahara, or was he behind $4.5 million in gambling debts to an illegal bookmaker in California? Now, this was discovered as the FBI was investigating the bookmaker, and they come across these slips, and they go, oh, whoa, Ohtani's name on it. Look at this. And Ohtani has said that it was only Muzahara acting alone. He didn't know about it until the debts came in, and this he had never bet in his life with a bookie, and he's completely innocent of this. Manfred said, it's really difficult for the federal authorities to cooperate with us fully when they have their own ongoing investigations, so I think this is one where we'll have to proceed on our own. We never have the kind of authority that law enforcement people have, but we managed to get these investigations done and find the facts, and I'm sure we will on this one. I hope it's short, but I don't know. You know, there's a third rail here. If it's found out that Ohtani is lying about being behind the gambling debts, that's one thing. Now, that can be settled with a fine and a suspension. But if the gambling includes baseball, betting on baseball, then they have a really, really big problem with the possibility that you're going to have to throw Shohei Ohtani in the same group with Pete Rose and ban him for life. Manfred was asked about the relationship that baseball has with gambling, as all sports leagues do. He says, sports betting is going to go on in the United States, whether we have a relationship with any particular company, any gambling enterprise or not. I don't think it's unusual to have a set of rules that apply to fans and executives and private citizens out there on one hand, and players and people who have the ability to affect the outcome of play on the field. There are all sorts of situations where you have a privilege, in this case, the privilege to play in Major League Baseball, and it comes with a responsibility to refrain from engaging in certain types of behavior, in this case gambling, that are illegal for other people. So they've got to get to the bottom of this, and if it's got Ohtani's fingerprints on these debts. Now, the number that keeps jumping out at me is the gambling expert who was on with Dan Patrick the other day. In fact, let me find what he said, because this, I think, really tells a big story about what's going on with him. His name is David Purdom, and he is a gambling analyst for ESPN. And listen to what he said about this $4.5 million of gambling debts that Ohtani's bookmaker, or Ohtani and the bookmaker, Ohtani and the interpreter, rang up.
I'm certainly interested in how he was able to rack up as many losses as we can. With debt we understood was $4.5 million in gambling losses. You have to be wagering probably close to 80 million, 100 million during that time to suffer those kind of losses, because you don't lose every bet, right? I mean, it's impossible to lose every bet. It's impossible to win every bet. So you win some, you lose some. To get that down that much, you're betting significantly amount and a lot of volume. So I would just want more details on exactly his betting habits.
$80 to $100 million. That's what was allegedly bet to get to $4.5 million in gambling debt. You can't just place a $500,000 bet. You know, when you hear $4.5 million, you go, oh, man, maybe 9 bets that he all lost. No, doesn't work that way. Now, Tisha Thompson is an investigative reporter with ESPN. The LA Times broke the story of this, but she was able to take it a step further and get an interview with Ipe Muzahara. Tisha Thompson, her mother, Lee Thompson, was a consumer affairs reporter for Channel 4 here for many years, and Tisha worked in Baltimore in television before going to ESPN. She was on with Rich Eisen yesterday and talked about the first interview. She got 2 interviews with Muzahara. She talked about the first interview that she was able to get when the Dodgers were playing over in Korea last week.
Muzahara laid out that he had met the bookmaker at the center of all of this at a poker game after a Padres game in San Diego at the hotel room, or not the hotel room, I should say, at the hotel. And he proceeded to be extended credit by the bookmaker and began to place bets. And he, I obviously asked on baseball, and he denied, no, not baseball. He knew the rules about baseball, but the bets were on other things, including international soccer, domestic football, both pro and college, and professional basketball. So we continue to talk. I continue to ask questions. He explained he got deeper and deeper into debt. He was making roughly $85,000 when he was with the Angels, when he starts betting. By the time he and Ohtani go to the Dodgers, he's making somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000. He didn't want to disclose how much he was making. I told him we had sourcing that said it was somewhere in that range, and he confirmed that. So, his salary is changing, but he's getting deeper and deeper into a hole, according to his story. And at some point, he goes to Ohtani, and this is according to the first version of events that he tells me, because, of course, now we know that there will be a second version of events that I get the next day. But in this first version of events, he says that he goes to Ohtani, tells him that he's in financial trouble. Ohtani does not like it, but Ohtani offers to pay off the debts. And I then proceed to ask a number of questions. I wanted to know, how do you wire money to a bookmaker? How does that happen? Who did it? And it's through those series of questions and answers that I begin to get details where Muzahara says that it was Ohtani who logged into his computer and made the payments. And Muzahara says it was 8 to 9 payments of about $500,000 each. That matched sourcing that I had for the wire transfers. I had only seen 2, but I had been told it was at least $4.5 million. And then, of course, the next day, we get a different version of events.
Yeah, we'll get to that. So there's a second interview after that where Muzahara has said to ESPN that the gambling debts were his. He rang them up, but Ohtani found out about it and covered them. Go ahead and covered up the gambling debts, paid it off. Next day, there's a second interview. This is Tisha Thompson with Eisen on that.
The second interview that I do with Muzahara, he says Ohtani never knew about his gambling debts. In the first interview I did with him, he said he went to Ohtani in 2023. I have sourcing that correlates with that the payments, the wire transfers were made in 2023.
Okay. And then you said moments ago that at least $4.5 million. Is it possible there's more money than $4.5 million that was paid out by Ohtani? Tisha?
Right now we're reporting that it's at least $4.5 million.
And how about this? This is one bookie that's being investigated by the FBI. What if there are more? If he's got access to all this money that Ohtani has, that he can cover these gambling debts, whether it's Ohtani writing the transfers, the wire transfers, or somehow he's got access to the account, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But let's say that he does. Can he transfer $500,000 at a time without raising a red flag? It's crazy. And if he's ringing up this kind of debt with one bookie, maybe he's doing it with others. So when she says at least 4.5, maybe that's the 4.5 that was discovered by the FBI in this. But who knows how many other illegal bookies are out there? And we know that in California, that's not one of the 38 states that has legalized sports gambling. And Ohtani has spent his career in California with the Angels and now with the Dodgers. So when these two interviews come out and the story is about to be published, Thompson gets an immediate reach out from the crisis management team of the Dodgers, and they want more on this. And they're now trying to get their arms around it. They're saying, no. It was theft. It was theft by Mizuhara, and we fired him. So Tisha Thompson, being a good investigative reporter, says she then reaches out to Mizuhara.
First, I read him the statement and I said, what is your response? And I didn't get a whole lot. And I said, Ipe, did you lie to me in that interview? And he says, yes. And that's when I get into this yes, no. And you can read the details of some of those yes, no questions in our story that we published on Friday. And you can see, I'm asking, is someone paying you to say this? Or, have you made some kind of agreement to say this? And he says no. But I also say, was there, confusion, or did you purposely misinterpret? I don't know if that's the right word, but did you purposefully tell Ohtani something differently than what his representatives had said in English, and vice versa? Did you say something differently than what Ohtani said in Japanese to his English representation, like his agent or, lawyers or something like that? And he said, no, he had never done that. He had never interpreted anything incorrectly.
Wow. So, because the thing I don't understand, and that I'd love to get answered, and I'm wondering if you've gotten any answers on this front, is how it's not like you're just zelling $100, you know what I'm saying, to a friend. You're not Venmoing and putting in the notes that everyone can see. This sort of money that even if it is Ohtani sending it, you can't just wire $500,000 to somebody without a bank noticing or calling up or having some sort of an alarm bell set off. And then certainly if somebody's just wiring the money from a computer, there's got to be a code at the very least. You know what I mean? There could even be, over the 7th or 8th time, a banking representative that needs to be on the phone. Like, what's the nuts and bolts of the wiring process? What are the answers that you've gotten on that front?
As you can imagine, the investigative unit at ESPN, and I think a lot of other people are asking those questions to financial experts, but there's really only a very small group of people who will know the answer to that. And that is the people who deal with Ohtani's bank accounts and the people in Ohtani's circle. I will say, and this is just a general statement, this is not specific to Ohtani's banking. I will say, wealthy people operate in a different universe, and he's one of the wealthiest people in sports. They operate in a different universe. So my recommendation would be to folks, who don't have $500,000 to wire 8 or 9 times, over the course of the year. Don't take your experiences and apply them here. I think we're dealing in rarefied air.
Okay, but still, there are financial advisors, there are accountants, there are people who work for Ohtani. Now, maybe they're interested in shoving this stuff under the rug too, but it's just not that simple, no matter how rich you are, that you can make 9 transfers of $500,000 apiece and not get people noticed about this. So when Manfred says he hopes it'll be a short time to get this resolved, that means he starts to look and he says, oh, yeah, Mizuhara is telling the truth. We found that 100%. So we're done with this and on with the baseball season. Boy, if there's evidence that there was gambling on baseball, he may have to be the next Mark Giamatti. And this is even worse because Rose wasn't even a player then when he kicked him out of baseball. He was at that time a manager, and this would be the biggest star in the game, and the highest paid athlete in the history of professional sports, and you'd have to kick him out for gambling. Again, baseball's the third rail. Anything else, fine, suspension, we move on. Baseball, different story. Coming up, you want to feel like an Ulta Cocker? Listen to a guy who I always think of as being relatively young, talking like an Altacocker. One of the stars of March Madness of the past. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
1 hour, we'll look back at the Colts' departure from Baltimore for Indianapolis 40 years ago today. We've got Tony coming up at 11 o'clock, and I just saw this crossing the wires. Lou Gossett Jr. has passed away at the age of 87, the first black man to win a supporting actor, an Oscar, and an Emmy for his role in Roots, 87 years old. The Oscar that he won for Best Supporting Actor in An Officer and a Gentleman, we're going back to 1982, so what's that, 42 years ago. It was, I think it was a breakout role for Richard Gere, and Deborah Winger played the love interest, but as the drill sergeant, he was great. You eyeballing me? He was tough, but he had that just little bit of tenderness that let Richard Gere back on track after he had made a mistake, and just was, I think, a tremendous actor. A long career, but that's probably his most memorable role. And was someone who was involved in civil rights and marched with Nelson Mandela and so forth and so on. Passed away, no cause of death revealed, died last night in Santa Monica, California at the age of 87. So rest in peace, Lou Gossett Jr. We just had the celebration of the Christian Laettner shot that beat Kentucky. It was 32 years ago, and when you get to be my age, you think of things that happened during your adult life, and you think of the things that people did as being young people, right? In my mind, Christian Laettner is always 21 or 22, whatever age he was when he hit that shot. But we're going back 32 years, so now he's in his 50s, and I'm in my 60s. And I talk like this, but when I hear someone who I still think of as young, still think of as being in college, even though he had a pretty good NBA career, played, I think, 13 years in the NBA. I still think of him as the Duke guy who made the turnaround jump shot to beat Kentucky, one of the most famous shots in the history of basketball. And now he's an older guy. He's in his 50s, and he was doing some kind of promotion the other day, going on various radio shows, talking about his life, his career. And then they got into modern basketball, and this is when Christian Laettner, yesterday on the Mike Greenberg Show here on ESPN 630, launched into his Altacocker rant.
They got to change the transfer portal. I know everyone's saying the horses out of the barn and you can't take stuff back, but how can you establish any type of culture at a school when you're getting new kids every year? That would mean every year was like my freshman year at Duke, and you're so much better your third, your fourth year when you're under one system, one program, one coach, one specifically defined culture the way you want to play offense, the way you want to play defense. I don't know how the coaches do it in today's game, and that's why some of the better ones are starting to quit. The coach at Villanova,
Jay Wright.
He never should have quit.
Mm-hmm.
Nick Saban's thinking about quitting, or he already quit. I mean, it's so bad to see some of these great coaches stop coaching, and it's because of the NIL. It's because of the transfer portal. I think I saw something with Nick Saban where he said the first thing a kid says to him and a recruit says to him is, "How much money are you going to get me?" I mean, it's just horrible. It's horrible. I hope they change it.
Well, I know that you speak for a lot of people who feel that way, and I'm sure when you do, you get a lot of pushback. There are people who will say the previous system was totally unfair, that you as a star of college basketball in those days could have made a lot of money. If you were you now, you would make a lot of money. If players want to change places during their careers because it's in their own best interest, that they should have the right to do it. So when people push back at you that way, what do you say?
I say, well, life is not about immediate gratification. Life is not about immediate results. You have to work hard. You have to dedicate yourself. You have to become very, very good at something. Go to school. Work on your passion, whatever it is, music, sports, whatever it is, and you'll get the gratification at the end. And that's better at basketball. Make it to the NBA and then maybe you can get paid $50 million a year. That's what real life is, not this TikTok life, Snapchat life, social media life where you get immediate gratification and 1 million views. And oh my God, I just hate it. I'm sorry. I'm too old school, I guess.
Well, there's no reason to be sorry. It is. You're not the only person who has that perspective. When I hear people that way, and you, Christian, you and I are pretty close to the same age, you know, I feel as though what I try to do is adapt to the times. There's certainly parts of me that feel exactly the same way you do and appreciate how things used to be. But I remember when I was young, when you and I were young, and we would hear older people say, you know, things were so much better the way we used to do them. Sometimes I'm hesitant. I'm hesitant to go there. Do you ever feel that way?
Of course, and I understand. And sure, let's try things and let's see how it goes. And we tried the NIL thing and we tried the transfer portal, and man, it just doesn't seem like it's making the game better. If you ask me, look at UConn.
Mm-hmm.
I just love the way UConn plays. You can say that they seem to be a little old schoolish. They slow down at times. They pass ahead and they can play fast and fast break. They still shoot their three-pointers. But, man, they're the best team in college basketball last year, and this year they look really, really good. And I love it because Danny Hurley is making them play the correct way. Danny Hurley is getting some of his kids to stay so they can build on that culture, and they're just a great team, and it's because of him. And they have some juniors and seniors on their team, and it makes a huge difference if you ask me.
That's Christian Laettner yesterday on Greenberg before UConn won by 30 last night over San Diego State. But here's the problem with this argument. He's making the argument that it hasn't made the game better. Well, they didn't put in the transfer portal and the NIL to make the game better. They made it to make the game fair. And fair to the athletes who make all this money for the schools, for the coaches, for the TV networks, and they should share in some of the wealth. And, you know, from his perspective, someone who is one of probably the top 20 college basketball players of all time, the only player on the dream team, and there is only one dream team, the 1992 team, who had not played in the NBA and then got a 13-year career in the NBA, yeah, he's going to say the reward comes when you make it to the NBA. Well, a very small percentage of college basketball players ever make it to the NBA. So should they get nothing for what they do in their 4 years of college and produce tons and tons of income for their coaches, for the universities, for the networks, for everybody else, and not get a dime? Is that fair? No, I don't think that's fair. So the question is, how do you legislate it? How do you set it up so the athletes do get paid and we don't have the chaos that's going on in college basketball now? But I will say this. The tournament is still very entertaining, and it was long before the NIL and transfer portal came in that college basketball basically became a 3-week season, the 3 weekends of the NCAA tournament, and we've seen some great play. I mean, yeah, UConn blew the doors off San Diego State last night, but the Clemson-Arizona game was highly entertaining last night. Illinois got by Iowa State, which has been a good story of the tournament. And then we had a 1 seed knocked out with North Carolina. And it should be noted, Christian, North Carolina had a 4-year player and a 5-year player on their team. And they went down to an Alabama team, which has been an excellent program for the last couple of years. And now we'll see if they can get by Clemson, which is another great story in this tournament, an overlooked team from the ACC who they have a coach in Brad Brownell, I think is his name, and he was going to be fired if he didn't make the tournament. And now they are going on to the Elite Eight, and that will be played tomorrow afternoon. Coming up, 40 years ago today, Bob Irsay yanked the Colts out of Baltimore in a gutless move in the middle of the night. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Tony's coming up at 11 o'clock to round out the week. A little baseball here before we get to the Colts' departure 40 years ago today. Juan Soto now with the Yankees and off to a very good start. Played a big role in yesterday's win over the Astros in Houston, both at the plate and in the field and made the big play. 1 out, 2 runners on in the 9th inning. Yankees had a 1-run lead. Kyle Tucker hit a single to Soto in right field. The ball was clean, gathered it in, let it rip. 1-hop missile to home plate. Catcher Jose Trevino caught it before spinning around to apply the tag on Mauricio Dubon. Soto pounded his chest and released a few screams. And Aaron Judge said, that was a classic Yankee right there. Whether they're going to pay the money to re-sign him, we'll see. He's in the last year of his deal. But he made it to first base in his first at-bat in an 8-pitch walk, and then he had an RBI single a little bit later on in the game. But the throw was what helped seal the victory for the Yankees. And I just kind of look at the irony of Soto playing for the Yankees, and whether or not he re-signs, we'll have to see. He's going to be a free agent at the end of the season. Scott Boras always walks his guy to free agency. But when the Nationals drafted Bryce Harper, and I think that was 2011, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 2010. That's right. He came up the same time that they drafted RG3, which would have been 2012. So he spent a year in the minor leagues and then came up. The feeling was that he wouldn't get a second contract from the Nationals. And the team that everybody thought he would wind up with was the Yankees, because his father had been a big Yankee fan. Father helped him in growing up, playing baseball, loved baseball, and grew up in Las Vegas. And Harper wore number 34, even back when he was in high school. And the feeling was, that equals 7. 3 and 4 equals 7, Mickey Mantle's number. He's going to play in the outfield, want to play center field at Yankee Stadium. It didn't quite work out that way. And his replacement, and the reason that nobody really shed a tear when Harper signed with the Phillies after the 2018 season, was that, hey, Juan Soto's ready to step in. And he did, and he was great in the postseason, great for them that season. And, you'd hope that he'd still be playing right field for the Nats, but that's not the case. But after all this time, it wasn't Harper that winds up with the Yankees. It's Soto, and we'll see what happens in the offseason, whether he winds up there long term. But it would seem to be a perfect place, left-handed hitter and a right fielder. I would say that, barring something crazy, because they have the money, whether they want to, after what they paid Aaron Judge and others, whether they want to spend that kind of money on Soto, we'll see. But the irony is not lost on me that Juan Soto is playing in the outfield for the Yankees and Bryce Harper is not. 40 years ago today, the Baltimore Colts were engaged in a battle with Governor William Donald Schaefer, as he was, looking at demands from the Colts. Irsay had asked the city of Baltimore to pay for improvements to Memorial Stadium, and negotiations kind of went sideways. Irsay was a drunk, bad guy, and on March 28th, 40 years ago yesterday, the Maryland State Legislature passed a law allowing the city to seize the Colts from Irsay, what they called eminent domain. So Irsay, and this is the sleazeball that he was, he makes a deal to bring in moving vans. There's snow falling. It's late snow in Baltimore, and in the middle of the night, they load up everything on Mayflower moving vans and steal out of town. So the next morning, this was a report on WBAL TV on what had gone on overnight as the Colts 40 years ago left town.
Under the mask of darkness, the moving vans started pulling away from the Colts complex. They were taking away equipment, furniture, the trophy case that told of the Colts tradition, and they were bound for Indianapolis. The last of the trucks left in the dreary gray of morning. Not far behind were Colts employees and coaches. They were coming from a meeting with Colts lawyer Mike Chernoff.
There was nothing left to take. They took everything. Everything that was in our desks, on our desks. Mike Chernoff had us in a meeting room with no chairs or no table. Everything's gone.
He told you absolutely the deal is made and the Colts are going to Indianapolis.
Yes.
The building's empty and we've made the move to Indianapolis, and that's about the only thing I can tell you.
The Colts' exodus was well protected by police and security, but it wasn't needed. The only reaction of the few die-hard fans who came to watch was sadness.
Heartbroken's a good word. When you got over half your life involved with this ball club, like I have.
With nearly everyone gone, the last word from the Colts offices came from a team employee who'd just become a former employee.
It's over, so I just didn't want you guys freezing out here and getting all wet and sick out of this, because it's finished.
About noon, 2 security guards locked up the gates. The sign is still on the building, but this is no longer the home office of the Baltimore Colts. And the only thing left is a memory.
Would another team make Baltimore forget the Colts?
You'll never forget the Colts.
Jane Miller, Action News 11.
And that fan they were talking to, famous fan, Loudy Loudenschlager, who was known as like the #1 Baltimore Colts fan, and he had heard that the moving vans were taking the equipment out of their place in Owings Mills, and he drove out there and watched with tears streaming down his face as his beloved Baltimore Colts were taken out of town. Several hours later, Bob Irsay shows up at a rally at the stadium that they had built in Indianapolis, trying to lure an NFL team, the RCA Dome. This turned out to be very convenient for them. They had an immediate place to play, a nice place to play, the RCA Dome. And at this rally, Bob Irsay, who a few days earlier had held a news conference and said he was not going to move the Colts out of Baltimore, explained to the people why he had no choice but to move the Colts to Indianapolis, and that is followed by comments from the governor, William Donald Schaefer.
Well, I mentioned before, it was not a monetary decision. It was a decision that you people, the press, have hounded my family for the last 2 years, and my family was not about to take any more of your hounding. I think I put it to the point. When I woke up one day and saw that the governor had put a bill through the legislature, which I think is against anything in the United States that people here have freedom. So that means now that anybody that has a plant in Maryland and the state or the city wants it, that the state and city could say, hey, that's mine. And I've told you people in the press, it's not your ball team, it's not our ball team, it's my family ball team. I paid for it and I worked for it.
The thing that he always said, and we always had an agreement, handshake between gentlemen, all the rest is, before I move the team, before I take any action, I'll pick up the phone and tell you. And I believed him. One man can just pick up a team and leave, sneak out under cover of night, which really irritates me no end. But he sent in his lawyer Cherkov, or Chonikov, whatever his name is, to sort of engineer it, to pull out at the midnight and 2 o'clock in the morning. That's the thing that hurt.
Yeah, it was very painful for people who grew up rooting for the Colts because they were part of the community. In the days, certainly the early days they were there in the 1950s, football players didn't make what they make now. And people lived in amongst the players. They lived in row houses. They saw them. They had businesses there. They had off-season businesses. And they were like part of the soul of the whole community of Baltimore. And they didn't have a team from 1984 until the Cleveland Browns moved there in 1996. They moved into Memorial Stadium. And one of the things that they did that was very smart when they became the Ravens, and that was something that football, NFL did smartly. They allowed the Browns to move to Baltimore, but they said the name and the logo has to stay. So when they got an expansion team a few years later, they were the Baltimore Colts. I'm sorry, they were the Cleveland Browns. The Baltimore Colts should have stayed the Baltimore Colts. And when they left for Indianapolis, they should have been forced to leave the name and the logo behind. But they did not. And now they're the Indianapolis Colts, and the Ravens are the Ravens. But one of the things they did, they had some of the legends out there in 1996 for the first game, and guys like Johnny Unitas and Lenny Moore, and they were taking off their Colts jerseys and handing them to the new players on the Ravens. So that helped to soothe some things. And also the Colts marching band stayed together all those years. They didn't have football games to play at, but they stayed together, and that helped to make the transition. But I've always felt, and even now as I watch Indianapolis Colts games, I've always felt that it was just a tragedy that the name and the logo did not stay. Because in Cleveland, they celebrate the Browns as, part of what was before the teams that they had with Jim Brown, the team that won the championship in 1964. That's a kind of a continuum. Whereas in Baltimore, the Colts are now in Indianapolis, and it's been so long that the Ravens have been there. We're coming up on, 30 years for them there, that there are generations of people who never knew the Colts. And so the Ravens have always been their team. But I always felt that was one of the worst things that happened in that. And Irsay was just a complete bum, a complete liar. And if you want to have a contest of hated owners, you could probably make a really good case for Dan Snyder #1. But I think at least you could say he kept the team in Washington or in Landover, and he didn't move them to Landover. The previous owner did. We're splitting hairs here, but among bad guys, Irsay is right up there. One last thing, a bipartisan group of senators delivered a stern warning. Keep your paws off our French fries. The lawmakers, led by Senator Susan Collins, a Republican, and Senator Michael Bennet, a Democrat, said they'd gotten a whiff of an effort to strike potatoes from the government's dietary list of vegetables and reclassify them as a grain. They argue that a medium baked potato has 15% of the recommended daily intake of dietary fiber, 27% of vitamin B6, and 28% of vitamin C. So they do not want them classified as a grain. I guess you would classify them as a vegetable, which reminded me of the late, great Artie Donovan, Hall of Fame player for the Baltimore Colts, and someone I got to know a little bit over the years, really liked him. He lived to be the ripe old age of 89. He drank Schlitz beer by the case. His nickname was Fatso, which he was for most of his life. And as he said to me once, the only vegetable that ever passed my lips was a French fry. So I think in spirit, Artie Donovan is with these lawmakers and saying, please don't classify French fries as a grain. This is something that is a side dish, I guess, for hamburgers and other things. Harvard University's Healthy Eating Plate Initiative refuses to classify them as a vegetable, fretting over what potato starch does to blood sugar and insulin levels. So they are against that. They say, for example, a cup of potatoes has a similar effect on blood sugar as a can of cola or a handful of jelly beans. So there's a battle going on over the French fry. But some lawmakers are saying don't reclassify that as a grain. And I think in the spirit of the Baltimore Colts, who were lost on this day to Indianapolis, we celebrate the great life of Artie Donovan and once again mention his mantra that no vegetable ever crossed his lips except for the French fry. Anyway, great weekend coming up with all the hoops. We got baseball off and running. The Capitals trying to get a Stanley Cup playoff berth. Got a big game with the Bruins tomorrow night and a lot to talk about on Monday, which we will do at 9 o'clock. Tony is coming up next, and I'll see you Monday morning, 9 a.m.